Hi, my name is Sydney Cruz, and my final paper will be on improving teacher retention. Before we move forward, I want to provide two working definitions. The first being a teacher shortage is defined as the inability to fill teaching vacancies with individuals who are qualified to teach in needed areas. The second being that teacher retention is the ability to maintain educational staff in schools and the ability to reduce turnover. Now, the central idea of my entire paper specifically is how to address educator identified deficits to combat those teacher shortages. The paper will be composed around three arguments that build upon one another: identifying the problem, why that's a problem, and how the problem can be addressed. So, the first argument is that teacher retention is definitely a problem across the entire United States. Second, educators have expressed very clearly why they are leaving the teaching profession at such an alarming rate. And third, there are solutions that can be and have been and are being implemented by schools, administrators, school districts, and policymakers to address teacher retention across the country. Teacher retention is a problem across the nation. Before we can understand why that's a problem, we need to understand that teaching is a labor market and that student enrollment directly influences teacher demand. So, as the number of students increases every year, the need for more teachers grows. However, what we're currently experiencing in America is student enrollment going up, but teacher employment going down. Now, the NCES, or the National Center for Education Statistics, estimates that student enrollment will grow by 2025 to 53 million students, which will then require a demand of about 300,000 or more teachers. Considering the numbers of teachers that are leaving the profession, this poses a major concern, especially in certain content areas. Now, there are certain content areas, especially at the high school level, that are experiencing higher numbers of teachers leaving than others, such as math, science, SPED, or special education, CTE, and bilingual education. Those areas require teachers with very extensive or very specific academic backgrounds. And if we don't have teachers going into the profession and going into those fields, those areas are, as we see now, going to be lacking in teachers. We also are seeing high levels of teacher shortages in underserved communities, very urban communities, rural communities, poverty-stricken communities, areas in which there are high populations of minorities, as well as areas where there are very low achieving students and members of the community. Now that teacher retention has been identified as a problem, the next section of the paper will discuss why it's a problem. So, the second argument is what educators who have left the profession have expressed as their reasons for leaving. The first and the number one being salary. They simply aren't paid enough. Two, working conditions. Many things fall under the umbrella of working conditions, and I'll be able to go into more detail in my paper about that, but some of them have been listed here. Three, preparation. Are there college programs? Are there licensure programs? Are there alternate teaching programs preparing them and giving them the knowledge they need, the content specific knowledge, and helping them develop the pedagogy needed to be successful within their classrooms with actual students and while working with other teachers? And four, support. Support throughout my research I discovered was probably the second most prominent reasons a lot of teachers left the profession. They didn't feel like they got that continued education we discussed in this course once they joined the profession, and that things became increasingly difficult or became hard to manage, and they never felt prepared. They often felt like they didn't know what to do. So now that we've briefly touched on what is causing teachers to leave, we can move into the final portion of the paper, which is how it can be fixed. Now, those responsible for fixing this will be your schools, school districts, colleges, and policymakers. Um, and the angle I took in my paper was more so what's being done in certain places and how those things can be modeled in other states that need or that have a higher need for retaining teachers. Now, some of the solutions being put in place are offering scholarships to people who are going into the profession, offering loan forgiveness for teachers that are currently in the profession, creating teacher pathways. So, secondary education journeys that match the student, right? Offering mentors and training and developing high quality principals, offering competitive compensation, and then implementing recruitment policies that will help keep teachers inside of the classroom. The entities discussed in my previous slide are my target audiences. So, school administrators and school districts work the most closely with teachers. Therefore, they are the most able of implementing quick or immediate change to address teacher identified deficits. They're also probably the first ones to hear those teacher identified deficits, making them the first line of defense when combating teacher shortages. And state and local policymakers hold the financial power in the labor market, that is education or that is teaching. They have the power to address the most prominent deficit, which is teacher salary. School districts can only do so much within the confines of their financial or their funding from the state. The state has to be proactive about changing and improving teacher pay so that it is competitive with other college level careers. And finally, these are my 10 sources. Uh, Thank you for watching, and I look forward to receiving your feedback this week.